due to COVID-19 restrictions, so there is no public access to the council chambers, and the proceedings are web streamed live and archived under the county's website. So with that, I will go to point number 2, approval of the agenda and changes to the agenda. So my understanding, board members, is that Mr. Dan Nagy will not be able to attend today, but promises to come back in January of the new year. And is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
So with that, that I see is the only change to the agenda. Seeing that there's only one change, then if I can, Mr. Plott, if you can look at...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The motion for this is that the agenda be approved as presented with that one amendment. Can we please have a mover? I see Willie is the mover. Can we have a seconder? Sorry, I think Mayor Chop's in the lobby. Mayor Chop?
Yeah, sorry, I think I'm gonna have some connection problems here on and off, but we'll see. I'll keep trying.
Okay. So the motion we're voting on is that the agenda be approved as presented. Willie's the mover. Would you like to second that?
I can second that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay.
Is Councillor Huffman going to be joining us? I don't. If you don't have quorum without me, there's going to be a little bit of an issue. Like I said, because I'm not going to be able to stay.
Madam Mayor, are you leaving right now? Because Councillor Huffman's not joined us quite yet.
You've only got me for a little short bit here.
Now, Madam Mayor, is it possible that you could stay at least until we have the first deputation by Mr. Feltmate?
Most definitely.
I'll make it fast.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor.
So we should call for the vote.
Okay, so calling for the vote that the agenda be approved as presented.
In favor.
Favor.
That carries.
It is carried. Okay. What I'd like to do is just welcome everyone, Madam Mayor, Provincial Appointee Van Houten, our OPP, I believe, and his staff. I would also like to say good morning to our representative from the Solicitor General's office, Mr. Ronald Leclerc. Welcome. And our deputant, Mr. Feltmate, welcome.
Thank you.
So with that, we'll go to point number 3, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Seeing none, we'll continue on. Confirmation of the minutes from the previous meeting. 4.1, Police Services Board meeting of October 20th, 21, pages 3. Okay, Secretary Plott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The motion for that's going to be that the minutes of the Police Services Board meeting of October 20th, 2021 be approved as presented. Can we please have a mover for that motion?
So moved.
Can we have a seconder for that motion, please?
I can second that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I see that Councillor Huffman is joining us. Councillor Huffman, did you hear that motion? Okay. Oh, you did not hear that motion? Then I'll reread it. That the minutes of the Police Services Board meeting of October 20th, 2021 be approved as presented. And then Provincial Appointee Willie has moved that and Mayor Chop has seconded that. We can ask for the vote then.
Morning, Councillor Huffman, and welcome.
Good morning. Sorry, I had some technical difficulties. My iPad wouldn't let me log in.
No problem. So with the motion, all in favor? Okay, that seems to be carried. Thank you. And we'll move on to the presentations. We have a deputation, 6.1, Mr. Doug Feltmate, with regards to the Ontario Provincial Police COVID control. So, Mr. Feltmate, I will put the floor to you, and just so that our board members are aware and the OPP, on page 11 of the agenda is Mr. Feltmate's deputation. So if we wish to follow, we can. So, Mr. Feltmate, go ahead, please. Thank you.
Well, in the interest of saving time for this board, I sent my deputation ahead of time so that everybody could read it. And I'm, rather than spend another 15 minutes reading it again, I think that's a waste of time. And I'm prepared to answer any questions on it at this point in time. No questions?
Do we have any questions, board members?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Feltmate. Mr. Feltmate, would you mind perhaps just giving a high-level overview of it, just in case some of that information might have been sent out later? So perhaps still give a high-level update just for those watching live.
Basically, in my investigation of the OPP's handling of COVID, that they're using a minimum standard of protection for their current staff, which is the masking policy. And I believe that a vaccine mandate is in order here, given the current rise in COVID rates and the wisdom of the experts in this matter, who to a person have stated that vaccines are the only way that we're going to get through this epidemic, this pandemic that we're having right now. So I'm trying to convince the powers that be at the OPP to do the right thing. And to start with, I had asked for information on their vaccination percentages and the number of people affected by COVID in their force, to which I got, well, you can get that under the Freedom of Information Act. Now, that's just nothing but a stall tactic as far as I'm concerned. If they've got that information, produce it. If they haven't got that information, why haven't they gone after it? My point is I wanted to talk to Inspector Scott and find out if they've done a proper survey. I mean, the force has worked for a year of trying to convince people to get vaccinated, and yet nobody that I've talked to on this board knows what percentage they're at, what damage COVID is doing to their people. These are questions that are basic and require answers. That's the point of my presentation. I've made all sorts of references to experts in the presentation, and just a matter of finding out from the OPP what they're doing and what they're going to do.
If I may, Mr. Feltmate, I believe under those 8 pages, there was a response by our Chief of Police, Chief Scott, I believe on the 21st of November, directed to you. Did you receive that?
Yes,
direction?
yes, I read that. And that's where they say you want information on vaccination rates and stuff like that. You go through the Freedom of Information Act. That's not an answer. That's a stall tactic. I mean, this should be public information. I mean, these people are, OPP are in the safety business, and this is a safety concern. What's the problem? I'd like to know if they've done a survey. Can I get an answer on that?
Mr. Feltmate, what I will do is I'll ask our Chief of Police, Chief Scott, to answer that question. So, Chief Scott.
Yep, through you, Mr. Chair. I have answered that question. We're part of the Ministry of Solicitor General, and we're in full compliance with the Ontario Public Service COVID-19 Safety Workplace Directive. And any information contained in relation to our members here that's medical is personal information. It's all outlined in the directive, and that can be obtained if Mr. Feltmate wishes, he can go through the freedom of information to find that. I answered to the Commissioner of the OPP on this matter, who answers to the Solicitor General. We're in full compliance here at the Norfolk Detachment.
No, I'm not after personal medical information. I'm after percentages of vaccinations. Easy question. Have you done a survey? Answer that question.
I believe I've answered the question, Mr. Chair.
No, you haven't. You haven't answered the survey question. Let's not play, hide around the corner. I want a direct answer on whether or not you've done the survey. And you know what the percentages are. Is that a yes or a no?
My job is to ensure that we have an effective police force for community safety standards here in Norfolk County.
Yeah.
We do. We have addressed that, and we follow the directives of the ministry. End of story. I'm not going to answer further to that.
Excuse me, Mr. Feltmate. So the answer I hear from the chief is fairly clear. I see Councillor Huffman has a question for you. I want to make something clear, Mr. Feltmate, that we're under Section 10 policing. So we as a board, Norfolk Police Services Board, we're limited with regards to the operations that happens locally. So with that, Councillor Huffman, you have a question?
Yes, I do. I just wanted to get a clarification. Thank you, Chair, for Mr. Feltmate. So the premise of your deputation is that you feel that the Norfolk detachment of the OPP are under vaccinated, or you're just feeling frustration that you're not getting the actual numbers of the constables or individuals vaccinated?
There's no question that they are under vaccinated.
Okay.
And they can hang into this, we're following the provincial directives, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't answer the question. You should know exactly how many people you got vaccinated, and you've worked for the last year in trying to convince them that you should be vaccinated. And you've got a fair percentage, like the normal average out there in the public is somewhere in the neighborhood of 20% who are not vaccinated. And yet your people, your OPP, are doing the same job and a lot of times as the paramedics who have to be vaccinated. You're involved with the public all the time. And I think you should really rethink this and quit holding up these artificial barriers that are unnecessary when we as the public who are paying your rate, paying your big salaries, like your average officers make over $60,000 a year. These people should be responsible from a COVID standpoint too, a vaccination standpoint.
Okay.
And yet we're getting zero information. And I suspect that no survey has been done. And you correct me if I'm wrong there, Inspector. Correct me if I'm wrong. No survey has been done. You don't care to know how many people are vaccinated.
Excuse me, Mr. Feltmate.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
is that the OPP is very engaged with the ministry in compliance to the standards in relation to vaccine, ranted antigen, RASP testing, education, engagement, and exemption policies as outlined in the COVID-19 Safe Workplace Directive, and that we at Norfolk are in compliance with that, and we report any issues up through the Commissioner's office. If Mr. Feltmate wishes to have any more, given the avenue to achieve that, his goal, if that's what he wants. That's all I have in answer to this question, Mr. Chair.
Are you,
Thank you, Chief Scott.
as a local head of the OPP, allowed by, or will you, to produce a survey and follow through on it? Does Aurelia allow you to do that? Yes or no?
It's not about whether I can do it or not.
Oh
It's,
my
it's
God,
the,
you can't answer the question. Come on. Yes
I've
or
answered
no? I
I've
don't want
answered-
any blah, blah, blah. I want yes or no to answer the simple question.
Excuse me, Mr. Feltmate. I believe he did answer the question. With
Yeah,
that,
but he didn't say yes or no. The question is, are you able to do your own survey without Aurelia's approval?
Chief Scott?
I answered the question, Mr. Chair. This is the entire COVID. We've lived this for well over 2 years. And trust me, when you're connected to the Ministry of the Solicitor General, as we are, it's very complex and incredible waters to navigate to ensure that we have officers on the road 24/7. I take that very seriously, as I do the privacy of our members in relation to antigen testing, vaccine, and all that. That's medical information. I've provided the answer if he wishes to explore this further, but that's all I have.
Thank you, Chief Scott. Mr. Feltmate, we have Councillor Huffman.
Yes, I
Ask
see that.
another
Yep,
question.
yep.
Councillor?
Okay.
Sorry
Okay,
about that, Councillor.
thank you. Through you, Chair, actually, would it be possible to ask Inspector Scott a question?
Councillor Huffman, by all means.
Okay. Inspector Scott, could you expand on the provincial mandate that you keep referring to? What is the mandate for the Ontario Provincial Police regarding the COVID vaccination?
It's a several-page document, Councillor Hoffman, but it specifically addresses screening at workplace locations, vaccine requirements, rapid antigen testing requirements, education component, and exemptions in relation to the vaccine. It's found. I can provide you with this directive at another time if you wish, but that's what it addresses, and it also includes personal protective equipment and that are required to be worn by our officers.
Okay, so you're so that's from the Solicitor General, and you're stating that our detachment is in compliance with that mandate.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Councillor.
The-
Mr. Feltmate?
Yes, further to this survey, the Toronto Police have a vaccine mandate in place, and they did their survey. It's funny, they didn't run into any complications such as we're following what the minimum guidelines that the government has given us. And, you know, they got through it quite well, actually. They ended up only losing, I think it was 2.8% of their force. And they handled that quite easily. And then not a lot of officers were part of that 2.8% either. So how can the OPP be so behind the Toronto police force in terms of doing a survey and finding out where they're at with COVID vaccinations? How can they be so behind?
So, Mr. Feltmate, is that a question to the OPP?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, Chief Scott, if you could, please.
For you, Mr. Chair, I can't speak for the Toronto Police Service or the governance that they'd have to adhere to. I can speak to the fact that we're in compliance here, and we've always been able to address calls for service here in Norfolk County since the onset of COVID. So I'm really at a loss as to what the necessity for this line of questioning or inquiry is about. We've always addressed those concerns through the Police Service Board in relation to staffing and any of that. And we're, like I said, we're in compliance, and we have officers on the road today as we have since March of 2020.
Just one last point, if I might. Obviously, I'm getting stonewalled here, so I'm going to move on to another area which you should be totally. Does anyone on this board know what an LAC is? LAC.
An LAC?
Yeah.
It's a very good question. But
I come from a big background in labor arbitration cases. involving contracts with different groups. And we would use arbitrators from the province to hear all the facts of the matter and decide on what was appropriate under the law, under the contract, and under other previous decisions that they had made. So an LAC is a labor arbitration case, which are found in binders. And I had a good library, and we used to use this all the time when we would fight issues that were in contention between the parties. So arbitrators, generally speaking, have some of the best educated minds in labor law and contract interpretation. They're impartial, and they have the final say after the lawyers for and against are done. They review the facts, your collective agreement, labor laws, and previous decisions by other arbitrators, LACs, for similar grievances and facts. The LAC vaccine mandate arbitration cases I have found online are all in favor of the employers, except for one recent case in which the union had a partial ruling in their favor. The arbitrator made some very good points, which you should be aware of. An electrical workers union was dissatisfied with a new vaccine mandate, which required all of them to be vaccinated and provide proof of that to the employer. Failure to do so in the time provided could end in discharge. They argued that the employer had no right to their private information. I heard this argument today. That most of them were working remotely with no exposure to the public, that they already had a high vaccination rate above 90%, and that facing discharge for non-compliance was excessive. The arbitrator noted that when assessing employer rules or policies that affect employees' individual rights, such as privacy, arbitrators often apply the KVP test, which sets up the scope of when an employer can exercise its management rights and unilaterally impose a policy. The KVP test requires that policy to be consistent with the collective agreement, to be reasonable, be clear and unequivocal, and be brought to the attention of the employee before the employer acts on it. He was satisfied that the employer's need for knowing which employers could be safely assigned to public areas where vaccination was more important, and that need to know outweighed the employee's right to privacy. Therefore, the employees must provide proof of vaccination or claim non-vaccination. However, the company was cautioned not to release any employee's personal information, which is not what we're looking for. We're looking for the fact that the survey was done properly and in timely fashion. He then ruled that primarily remote work and high vaccination rates were valid arguments against the mandate, and that the threat of discharge should not be used. The mandate was then sent back to their Health and Safety Committee for reworking. After that, he reminded the union that the employer still may have to assign employees to public areas where a need for vaccination was important. And if a non-vaccinated employee refuses that assignment by not getting vaccinated, that employee could be suspended. Okay, so even though the reports in the news say that the union won a case, it really wasn't a win. It was a clarification of what the employer's rights are. And I believe the OPP has the right, under the law and under their agreements with the association, to go ahead with a survey and a mandate. And I have yet to hear one fact from the OPP that differs from that. They're following a minimum standard, which is masking when the vaccinations are in order given the seriousness of this pandemic. And I think you should really take a look at being hard-nosed about this and start doing more for your people. You're in the safety business, protect your people too.
Mr. Feltmate, if I may just add, before I get to Councillor Huffman, the Ontario Provincial Police has over 9,000 employees. That's my understanding.
Fine.
And one would think that we have a government agency that is definitely well connected and following the rule of law in that regard. So, Mr. Feltmate, what I will do, Councillor Huffman has had her hand up on 2 occasions, so I'll have her just ask another question in that regard.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Huffman?
Thank you, Chair. Actually, I don't have so much a question as more of a statement, I guess, is that I appreciate the deputation, and I do understand that all the way around, and we, in terms of the COVID vaccination and the uptake, and we deal with this as a member of the Board of Health, but ultimately what it comes down to is that our local detachment is a piece of the puzzle with the Ontario Provincial Police, and doesn't really have the mandate to take on anything individual such as this, dealing with unions and things like that. So I appreciate the sentiment, and I understand the willingness to keep everybody safe and have as many people vaccinated as possible. But I think Inspector Scott's hands would be tied in terms of taking on an individual crusade within his detachment, because he needs to follow the rules of the OPP as an entity. So those are my closing remarks. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor.
I appreciate those remarks, and I'm in a complete agreement. And my feeling too is that Aurelia is pulling the strings down here, and unfortunately, Inspector Scott is hamstrung from doing the right thing, and I was hoping this board could make a recommendation to Aurelia to allow his people to take care of the COVID problem within the ranks by going through with a survey followed by a mandatory vaccination.
Mr. Feltmate, thank you. I can say from my standpoint, I'm clear that Chief Scott has said what he's had to say in his letter November the 21st, and again, what he has said to us today. Now, I know your 8 pages is fairly clear. If you wish, we can ask our Chief of Police to send this up to Aurelia for comment, if you wish, but I do believe that Chief Scott has represented the Norfolk detachment well, and I know that it's not the answer you wish, but I can only say that it's well put together 8 pages. I will definitely just say, Mr. Feltmate, that we have to move on here. You're not going to get the answer I think that you want, but
No, I
wasn't.
I wasn't expecting it. To be honest, I was not expecting it. I was expecting that Aurelia was pulling the strings, and I was hoping that the board could somehow make a solid case with Aurelia for mandatory vaccinations, given the severity of this COVID outbreak. And it's going to get worse, folks. You've got people, I mean, somebody gets shot in this area, it hits the news, everybody's all over it, blah, blah, blah. Somebody dies of COVID, well, just one more death, sorry. You know, like, what's the difference? They're both dead. The difference is one you can ignore and the other one you can't.
Well, Mr. Feltmate, we're not ignoring this issue. We respect that issue, and I do believe that what we will do as a board is ask our Chief of Police, Chief Scott, to forward this information to Aurelia.
Appreciate that.
But as I have in the past, and we've spoken several times on the phone, Mr. Feltmate, we're under Section 10 policing. So our hands are tied. We're very limited in what we can do. Your 8-page report is definitely well documented, and I will ask after we're finished with the deputation here, the board and our Chief of Police to forward that off to Aurelia. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, folks, for your, Willie?
Oh, I believe we have a question from Provincial Member Van Houten. Willie?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, but just very briefly, and I heard the comments from Councillor Hoffman, and I 100% agree with her. I have to commend you, Mr. Feldman, for standing up for what you believe in. I agree as well, as far as I wish personally that everyone was vaccinated in helping us get through this. But the circumstances as they are, we're doing all we can, and we are, under what's being allowed. And it all came through the Solicitor General's office to start with some time ago. And but thank you very much for the deputation.
Okay. Can I ask one more, just quick question?
Thank you, Mr. Van Houten. Just before you ask another question, Mr. Feltmate, the Chief of Police has his hand up. Chief?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, and just for the board, Mr. Feltman, thank you for obviously showing some concern for the members of the OPP, but I can certainly rest assure you that the health and safety of all our members is of paramount importance to not only myself, but certainly the commissioner of the OPP. And we have to abide by the legislation and guidelines, and it's a very complex, they're very complex waters to navigate. So thank you once again, and but I can assure you that our members are here to respond to call for service to ensure public safety in Norfolk County. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you,
Just
Chief.
just one last question.
Okay.
Chief, your members of the force, at least where I worked anyways, the people that worked for that company, a lot of them were like family. You know, you knew them well. You had all sorts of association with them, not only at work, but outside work. And I'm not going to ask you what your opinion is on mandatory vaccinations, but I would ask you to consider it very seriously. And if you do come to the agreement that you could protect more of your people through mandatory vaccination, I would hope that you make a solid presentation on behalf of your detachment to Aurelia, because they have the ability to change, and I would hope that they would, given the circumstances with this pandemic taking over the unvaccinated. Thank you very much.
Mr. Feltmate, thank you. So that question is to our chief. Chief?
Through you, Mr. Chair. As I stated, I would never try and speak for our commissioner, but I know the health and safety of the membership of the OPP is of the utmost importance to him and our entire commissioner's command team, as is the members of the detachment, is to myself and our local command staff. So thank you, Mr. Feldman, for sharing, and I appreciate your input today. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Feltmate, thank you very much for your
You're
time.
welcome. Thank you for your time
And your care.
Appreciate it.
All right. And have a Merry Christmas, and thanks
All right,
for
you
attending.
too.
So
All
with
right,
that,
thank
we'll
you.
move on. I'll ask the Secretary with regards to the deputation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The motion for that will be that the deputation provided by Doug Feltmate regarding Ontario Provincial Police COVID control be received as information. Can we please have a mover for that motion? Councillor Huffman. Thank you, Councillor. Can we have a seconder for that motion? Member Willie, thank you.
Okay, all in favor?
In
Carried.
favor?
Thank you. Moving on to the agenda, the consent to agenda.
Mr. Santos, if I may.
Is that Mayor Chop?
It is, sir. My understanding was I had to leave the meeting with 10 minutes to go there at the last one, and I'm just my understanding from the clerk is there was a request from me. So if you're able, if you could move that up in the agenda, because I do have to get going. Otherwise, we will have to do it at the following meeting.
So Mayor Chop, you're referring to 9.6 of the agenda. I'm just wondering for that issue, if we can leave it to the end of the meeting. Is that all right?
Okay.
Mayor
Well,
Chop?
unfortunately, no. I have to go. That's what I've tried to indicate. So we'll have to do it at a subsequent meeting then.
Okay. Now, Councillor Huffman.
We should be able to move that item up.
Can we move it? Can we move it up? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So what we'll do then, through the secretary, is we will move to 9.6, which is Mayor Chop, the update, resolution number 4 from October the 20th, 21 board meeting.
So since I wasn't there, if you can provide me some background.
Sure. On page 4 of the agenda, there was a resolution, number 4. It was moved by Board Member Huffman, seconded by Board Member Van Houten, that the Board Member Chop be requested to provide any information regarding the alleged Police Commission complaint against the former Police Services Board Chair that was referenced in the media on September the 22nd of 2021, and that Mr. Ron Leclerc, the police advisor for the Solicitor General's office, be invited to attend the meeting of the Police Services Board to provide information related to the complaint process for the Police Services Board, and that was carried. So that ends there on page 5, Mayor Chop. Now,
Okay.
if I may, Mayor Chop, just so that you're aware, we do have Mr. Ron Leclerc, who's the police advisor for the Solicitor General's office here. He's going to speak at 9.3. So going back to this, that is the reason for resolution 4.
Okay, so first of all, it's not an alleged complaint. It is an actual complaint. I received a letter on September 20th, 2021 that was directed to myself, so I can't be compelled here to provide something to the board that was in my personal capacity, of which parts of it were in request to keep confidential. I will read you a couple of paragraphs, and then I will read you the subsequent follow-up email. So on September 20th, 2021, from the Ontario Civilian Police Commissioner, Your Worship, reference interview request preliminary review regarding Police Services Board Chair Dennis Trevally. The Ontario Police Commission writes in relation to its ongoing preliminary review into the conduct of Norfolk County Police Services Board Chair Dennis Trevally. The Commission has received and reviewed information that Mr. Trevally might have engaged in conduct which may have been in violation of certain sections of OREG 421/97, Members of Police Services Board Code of Conduct. The Commission determined to conduct a preliminary review focusing on the following 2 issues. I won't read the 2 issues. I'm going to read subsequent later on in the email, which is why it remained confidential. However, there was no restriction for disclosing to the media. It says in the second to last paragraph, the Commission does not impose any formal restrictions on communicating the fact of the Commission's preliminary review. To protect the integrity of the review, however, the Commission requests that you do not communicate anything publicly about the details of the review at this time. I will go on with the subsequent email that occurred on October the 6th, which reads, Your Worship, reference notice of file closure preliminary review. The Ontario Civilian Police Commission writes to further its correspondence dated September 20th, 2021, in which the Commission advised you that it had initiated a preliminary review into the alleged conduct of Norfolk County Police Services Board Chair Dennis Trevally. Specifically, the Commission advised you that its preliminary review would focus on 2 issues. 1, whether Mr. Trevally's various public comments regarding various Norfolk County officials and staff were in violation of sections 7, 8, 9, and 13 of OREG 421/97, Members of Police Services Board Code of Conduct. And 2, whether Mr. Trevally attempted to exert inappropriate influence regarding certain council matters in contravention of sections 7, 8, 10, and 13 of the Code. The Commission has received a copy of Mr. Trevally's letter of resignation from the Norfolk Police Services Board dated September 22nd, 2021, and effective September 30th, 2021. The Commission has determined to close its preliminary review in light of Mr. Trevally's resignation from the board. Please be advised that the Commission may reinitiate a preliminary review and/or investigation on its own motion pursuant to Section 25 of the Police Services Act if Mr. Trevally is reappointed to the board or appointed to another police services board. As the Commission has determined to close its preliminary review, it no longer requests that you attend an interview regarding this matter. The Commission thanks you for your availability and willingness to participate in its preliminary review. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to contact the Registrar at OCPC. Sincerely, Ian Altman, Manager of Operations. I subsequently sent an email to the Ontario Police Commission following receipt of that letter. I believe it was the following day. I can pull that up. It was shortly thereafter receiving the letter to ask whether or not I could provide the board and disclose that letter publicly. I never received a response from the Ontario Civilian Police Commission, given the time that has passed, and there was no indication in that letter specifically that it remained confidential. And since the board has made some suggestions that it was an alleged complaint, I've chosen to read that there for you today, and we'll be happy to provide the board and the public with a copy of the letter. The clerk can post it to the agenda.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Huffman, Member Van Houten, do you have any questions of the mayor? Seeing.
Yeah,
one.
can you see me? Yeah.
Member Van Houten, you have a question to the mayor?
Well, yeah, just for clarity's sake, I think I raised it before the last meeting to have it done in camera. So my main questions, I guess, would probably go to Mr. Leclerc on the complaint process. It was different than I thought. I first learned about a complaint at a grocery store, and then subsequently going straight home to read the Simple Reformer and seeing that it was something there. So I guess from my past experience, the process would be different than what I had just experienced under this process. So
if I may, Mr. Chair, I think the confusion here is that the letter was requesting an interview with myself to provide information. The request with myself had nothing to do with the Ontario Police Services Board. Rather, it had to, or the Norfolk County, Police Services Board. Rather, it had to do with my capacity as mayor. So that was why the Police Services Board had not received any information as of that time. And if the review had proceeded further and or sanctions had been applied, I'm certain that the Ontario Police Commission would have notified the Police Services Board at that time. But from my understanding, there were just initial interviews that were taking place.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. Member Van Houten?
yeah, and see, these are some of the questions that I would have, because if one member had the knowledge, one member of the police board, then all members of the police board, I would have thought would have had the same information. And
no, it had to do with council matters. I read out the two items for you. It had to do with Norfolk County staff, of which the Police Services Board would not have knowledge, and it had to do with, it specifically stated, council matters. I can read the line for you again if there's a question of it. Whether Mr. Trevally attempted to exert inappropriate influence regarding certain council matters. So it had nothing to do with the Police Services Board.
Okay, it didn't come out that way in the media, Madam Mayor. That's not what I read in the Simcoe paper that morning. It seemed to tie it. It seemed to tie it that it was something to do with the Police Services Board.
Well, it is the Ontario Police Commission that was doing the investigation, but there is a certain code of conduct that, as members of the Police Services Board, one is expected to uphold.
Right,
and so there was their jurisdiction. However, the interviews and the requests for information were not related to any other members of the Police Services Board.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have a question here from Councillor Huffman. Councillor Huffman, please.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Mayor Chop. Mayor, is there a reason that this wasn't brought forward to council?
It wasn't brought forward to council, Councillor Huffman, because it was directed to myself personally as a request for an interview. if the Police Services Commission chose to interview additional counselors, which they may very well have moving forward, then that would have been their determination to do so.
So I guess in summary, my thoughts are that overall this appeared to be extremely unprofessional and it was unnecessary. And I'm just not very happy with the way the whole thing rolled out.
Well, I'm not very happy with the way the whole thing rolled out either. I was asked by the media for my comments in regarding Mr. Trevali's resignation, and I directed the media to contact the Ontario Police Commission, and I said that I could not reveal any details of the investigation or the matter, but that they should reach out to the Ontario Police Commission, which is what was detailed in the letter to me. In fact, I believe there was a specific quote about the media.
I believe, Madam Mayor, there was reference to the Simcoe Reformer, and I believe there was also an article in the Port Dover Maple Leaf.
As I articulated, I directed them to reach out to the Ontario Police Commission, and per the letter, I did not discuss what the matters were that were being interviewed. And I believe Mr. Sonnenberg was able to contact the OPC. I am not sure of the details of that conversation.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. Do we have any other questions? Councillor Huffman? Provincial appointee Van Houten? No? Okay.
Again, I want to read you the sentence. The Commission does not impose any formal restrictions on communicating the fact of the Commission's preliminary review.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I believe, thank you, Madam Mayor. And I also believe that the agency is under the Ontario Ministry of Attorney General, not the Ontario Solicitor Generals. Is that correct?
I can't comment on that. I did not make any reference to the Solicitor General's office at no time.
Okay. So does that answer the...
I believe I heard that from another board member, but that wasn't from myself. What I have is Tribunals Ontario, Ontario Civilian Police Commission.
I believe that's the arm's length with the Attorney General's office, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm not able to comment. I don't know.
Could I ask our Solicitor General representative, Mr. Leclerc, to possibly answer that question, if that's possible? Mr. Leclerc?
Yeah, thank you. I believe it's part of the Solicitor General's office, but I could be incorrect. I'll do a quick check here and I will let you know.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing that we are waiting just for a quick reply here, Mayor Chop, thank you very much for being forthright with this. My understanding from my past experience is if any member of the board would have an issue, it would be brought to the board. And it was my understanding that if there was an issue...
Point of privilege, Mr. Santos, that is not correct. The letter was addressed to me in my capacity as mayor, referencing Norfolk County Council matters that involved a member of the Police Services Board. If the Ontario Police Commission wished to reach out to members, including the Vice Chair of the Police Services Board, that is at their discretion. They may have wished to subsequently interview members of the Police Services Board. That is not my role to bring that forward. There was no request from the Ontario Police Commission to disclose that matter to the board. They had everyone's contact and they could have reached out, and I'm sure would have reached out at the appropriate time. When the media contacted me subsequent to Mr. Trevali's resignation, it was quite surprising for me, the timing of the resignation, and I directed the journalists to contact the Ontario Police Commission for further information, disclosing the fact that there was an interview. Again, I read you the quote that there was no prohibition on that disclosure, but that I would not discuss any contents of the letter with them any more than I was willing to discuss the contents with members of the board without the Ontario Police Commission's blessing.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. I believe Mr. Leclerc has an answer. Ron?
Yeah, so the Ontario Civilian Police Commission is a quasi-judicial agency that is independent, but is overseen by the Attorney General's office.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Leclerc. Are there any other questions of the mayor? Councillor Huffman, provincial appointee Van Houten? No? Seeing none, I will ask our secretary to put forth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The motion is that the update provided by Mayor Crystal Chop regarding resolution number 4 from October 20, 2021 Police Service Board meeting be received as information. Can we please have a mover for that motion? Councillor Huffman. Can we have a seconder? Sorry, was that a hand, Member Hilton?
No.
We're still waiting for a seconder for that motion.
Not willing to second to receive a letter as information that was requested. I'm happy to second that, Aaron.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Now we can call for the vote.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So, Councillor Huffman, you had your hand up, correct? So,
Mr. Chair, if I may, I will email that to Aaron right now, and he can attach it to the agenda and provide a copy to the members.
thank you, Madam Mayor. And that is carried. So we will go back to the consent agenda, point number 7. So we're all on the same page here. Point number 7, consent to agenda. 7.1, the Ontario Provincial Police, Norfolk County Detachment, operational stats and highlights, October 2021, on page 21 onward. One question, Chief Scott, do we have any more updates or highlights for November?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I apologize. It's just the timing of this meeting. Our stats are usually reconciled organizationally any time around the 15th of the month. So that will have skewed many of our results in this report, which ultimately, the October stats would have been now up to date, and it would have skewed certainly some of our November stats. That's why certainly it's the importance of having our meetings after the 15th of the month as best we can. So that's all I can report on. As far as we have seen a few little increases in assaults and various things lately. Other than that, not a lot of note. Our ride campaign, did you want me to give the report now, Mr. Chair, or
If you could, please, we'll keep it consistent, and then if there's any questions, I'll pose that to our members. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll just go off the November report. It's the most current. We did see a little increase in our overtime. Much of that can be related to our deployments to Caledonia and some ongoing investigations and search warrants executed through our street crimes and crime units. It's nice to see that our auxiliary policing is back. We've had three new members to our unit here, which is a great assistance, and they've considered about 40 hours of administrative and 270 hours of training so far. So that's really good. I had a chance to meet them, and certainly had a recent retirement as well of a senior member of the auxiliary unit as well. So that was that. As far as, is there any questions related to the actual stats. Like I said, my apologies. It's just because of the timing of the meeting. In regard to our normal stats, I'll just bring your attention to a few ongoing focus patrols. Certainly, we've had some focus patrols to provide some support for our health unit in just having some visibility in the areas of some of the mobile vaccine centers, just as a proactive measure. To date, we haven't had any issues of concern, so that's good to know. We've started off our focus patrols in relation to the Simcoe Panorama. I know that's always of concern of vandalism taking place there, and that's unfortunately has gone on for many years, but we do still have our dedicated foot patrol initiative in Simcoe, so that should go hand in hand. And we've also started our annual Cottage Watch Focus Patrol to patrol the areas of our the vacation properties in the area. We still continue with our provincial initiative enforcement focus patrols, and however, there's been a few there that have come up, I believe, through Councillor Huffman. We did a brief focus patrol on Mechanic Street in Waterford in November. We dedicated 7 officers for 12 hours, and a total of 7 charges and 4 warnings were issued. I can appreciate it probably hasn't resolved the problem, but hopefully it's brought some awareness to the location. We also had another concern in the area of Donnelly Drive and stop signs in November, and 15 hours with 8 officers dedicated. Total of 9 warnings and 2 charges were issued in that location. So those are ongoing. A brief update. I know I just waited for the meeting. My apologies, Councillor Huffman. Just through checking through staff fashing in the Norfolk County Traffic Safety Board, the concerns on Renton we're alive to those. We've done considerable enforcement, speed studies, in my understanding, and perhaps staff fashion can correct me if I'm wrong, that those areas have been designated for some speed signs through the county. However, when they're deployed is beyond our kind of focus. But we will continue to patrol in those areas because we know it's certainly with the the increasing population and various things, and the way we've all changed our travel times over the last 2 years, we know that that's a main thoroughfare. So, John, I don't know if there's anything to add in relation to the Renton issue.
Those signs should be up shortly. I believe we've got the posts in place. That's the latest work I saw from the county. So hopefully by early January we'll have those speed signs in place here and elsewhere in the county. And
just finally, our festive ride program is up and running. Unfortunately, we're seeing some results, but our officers are out there in full force, and certainly we continue to answer many calls in relation to mental health and addiction related issues. So, John, is there anything that I've kind of any highlights there that?
No, I think we've covered everything.
So, unless there's any questions through you, Mr. Chair, that's the report.
Thank you, Chief and staff. There's a question from Councillor Huffman. Councillor Huffman, please.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Inspector Scott. First off, I just want to say thank you very much for following up on the Mechanic Street and Renton, and I'm very hopeful that those signs will be up soon. Renton just tends to be, I think, with with the proximity to the lake, with shift changes and things like that, it's a very heavy populated or traveled area, and speeds are not adhered to in that hamlet of Renton. Also, you guys have been in the news lately with some of your really stellar traffic stops and things like that, and really getting some individuals off the road, and I would like to thank you for that. My only damper is I keep hearing from the community the issue regarding foot patrol, and this has been something that I've been kind of passionate about since the beginning. I really feel, I know that when we use the word community policing, we're referring to kind of a different entity of the Police Services Board, but I see it as community policing when we've got foot patrol and you know, business owners see the police, you know, on patrol passing and residents see them. And it does appear to me that the stats are a little bit down. I know that that might be due to the weather and some deployment issues that you're having, but I would just like to really kind of hit home the importance of the community and those foot patrols. And in fact, I know that there was foot patrol done on Halloween in Port Dover, and it was quite a big deal. Social media was quite thrilled with the fact that there were officers kind of quote unquote on the beat Halloween, and it was really noticed by the community. And if there's anything that we can do to increase those stats, that would be greatly appreciated. Thanks.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councillor Huffman. Yes, it's always been a challenge to balance the foot patrol with certainly our calls for service. Many of our calls for service now require several officers, and then trying to do it where it's impactful, just kind of through our higher rates of call for service. We also had I received some good positive response from Foot Patrol in Port Rowan as well. So we do encourage that. It's expected. We have 5 new recruits coming. So those training, we're in such a training curve that there's often a lot of time spent just training officers, and of course reinforcing the fact of that community initiative that's I would say has been very strong tradition in this community for many years. So we'll continue to endeavor to persevere, and thank you for your input, but it's very difficult to be everywhere at the same time. And as someone said to me, well, we're sometimes out there in the nighttime as well, and we're not seen as well. So I'll leave it at that, but we will continue to work away at that as well. Thanks, Councillor Huffman.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Member Van Houten, do you have any questions?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just going through the entire report. I always enjoy Chief Scott as well. The 5-year, I know you always like to watch the trends, and it showed some of the statistics from the domestic. That's further on in the package, but about the trends in domestic disturbances, break-and-enters, and mental health and all that as well. Most of them trending down, just some trending up a little.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I would say from a 5-year trend analysis, most of our calls are reasonably, you know, I would say kind of on an even keel. You certainly want to tip it downwards. We do see some spikes from time to time, and that's certainly a good indicator over time with all the impacts that we've had in the last several years. The one thing I know it was covered in the media, but I can tell you that I know it's we have not forgotten about the cannabis marijuana issues that are a big concern in the community. We continue to work with Norfolk County Bylaw and Jim Milson. I think they're doing a fabulous job in mitigating a lot of these things for the police. And we also had 2 warrants in the Norfolk County area. I believe it was just early in the month or just last month in relation to the Pajafasset team, the marijuana team. So that was good that they were in our area as well to address some of that. So those are long and lengthy investigations. And there were many done elsewhere, I think over towards the London area and possibly Brant. So, and I know our street crime just had some very significant warrants and investigations in and around the Simcoe area as well. So lots of good work being done, and that's all I got. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Chief. I have 4 questions, and I'm going to just quickly refer to these pages with regards to the stats. I'm going to refer everyone to page 28 of 89. I note here where it says incidents of motor vehicle collisions and types. that we have 4 fatalities, and this is October of 2021, which is 2 months ago. We have basically a 300% increase. So, Chief Scott, could you kind of give us a clear understanding of these fatalities? Are they related to alcohol, speed, or just misfortunes?
I think realistically, many of our collisions are misfortunes. I'd speak just to the last one, the tragic incident with the bus driver. That was certainly a misfortune. There's always interlying twines of perhaps alcohol, inattentiveness, driver error. So it's really hard to say with four. I don't have those stats pulled right in front of me, but as a general rule, we do see them where it is impairment. Our officers are enforcing, and we've seen some good positive enforcement action in relation to impaired by drugs. But many unfortunately are just through driver error and misfortune on a lot of occasions.
Okay, thank you, Chief. So that would basically be 5 fatalities. So we've had 4 in October. The fatality you're referring to was last week out in Langton. So that'd be 5 fatalities then.
Correct.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. All right. Also, Chief, the next question I have is on page 30 of 89, and that, of course, being speeding. This, of course, goes back to September, these stats, and this is alarming to myself. When we look at the speeding charges, we have 1,552 charges of speeding up until September of 2021, which is an increase of 7.6%. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, any increases we've had in that, I welcome. Certainly, with new officers, we've had a lot of new officers joining the ranks, and certainly as a good measure of performance and learning, traffic enforcement is kind of that bottom line where officers start to get engaged on their own and work in the community. So we've got a lot of keen young officers out there. We have had the provincial traffic team in as well to do some enforcement, and they usually come in and it's usually some pretty good enforcement as well. I anticipate seeing maybe, with the weather, some drop-offs on some of that type of enforcement just because of weather. And then with 5 recruits coming, we still have several recruits attached to coach officers. So oftentimes you'll see some of those provincial stats drop because you're taking 2 officers off the road per se, and putting them together, and one's in a teaching mode and one's in a learning mode. So it's usually, I anticipate some ebbs and flows in some of those enforcement until everyone's out there working independently and together, but independently, and gets a sense of what their role is in the community.
Thank you, Chief. Councillor Huffman, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to tag on to what you had just commented on in terms of the speeding. And I can say, as a council, the number of complaints that we're getting regarding areas that have never been of issue before, it's just through the roof. People are just not adhering to any of the speed limits, negligent with even full stops at stoplights and stuff. It's just very concerning. And I really appeal to the people in Norfolk County to take care of each other out there and follow the rules of the road. And hopefully some of these can be put behind us, but we're seeing a substantial increase in the complaints and particularly as well in residential areas where it's of great concern for the safety of children and things like that. So it's gotten to be quite an issue.
Thank you, Councillor Huffman. 2 other questions, Chief, if I may. On page 33, and I think this is important for all board members to look at. On page 33, 911 calls. Compared to last year, I know we're up. The concern that I have here, Chief, is this. when I look at the month of April of this year and I look at the month of October, the numbers have skyrocketed. I mean, 76 911 calls that are either non-specific, misdialed, or dropped in April. And then in October, I don't know what happened in October, we've got, again, non-specific or non-specified, misdialed, and dropped 49, with the total of 405 so far up until, of course, these stats were given. So, Chief, my question here is, I see this as public mischief. Are these individuals being charged under the criminal code for this? If you can answer, please.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Oftentimes it's trying to determine where these calls come from. The call will be dropped. That's just a cell tower. Many times it's children, so far be it from us to try and charge someone that's 3 years old. But what I can say is that I know our provincial comm center vets many more of these out at the provincial call center that our officers don't even receive. So unfortunately, as long as people have cell phones, we're going to continue to get these. But I think that's been in place, John, since what, the last year and a half?
At least through you, Mr. Chair, at least the last 2 years we've had it in place. And although these numbers seem high compared to the process we had prior, these will be significantly lower.
Absolutely.
If we went back and looked at the statistics from 2019, for example, we'd find these numbers to be significantly higher than they are right now.
So if I may, Chief Scott, to Staff Sergeant Fashing, so things are getting better with reference to the 911 calls?
Oh, yeah.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, they are. These calls for service are significantly lower than they were prior to the new systems being in place. If memory serves me correct, we would do well over 100 911 calls per month prior to our new vetting system.
Okay, thank you, Staff Sergeant. Thank you, Chief. And my last question to the board members and to our chief, of course, and Councillor Huffman referred to this, foot patrols, and this is on page 34. So, Chief, the definition of foot patrols with the OPP, can you explain to me what foot patrols mean?
Well, not to be flippant, Mr. Chair, but it means to walk in your boots and not drive in your car. But certainly, no, it's certainly to get out and walk and walk through the parks, go into local establishments, interact with the public. That's what it is in general. Do property checks at nighttime in alleyways and various things like that. Oftentimes, if officers are walking through, like it's always when the schools were open, walk through a school, is it foot patrol or school patrol, right? So it's just that being out of your car, being engaged with the public, and trying to be visible. Having said that, when you do foot patrol on night shift, you're not always visible to the public, and but that's really the definition of foot patrol.
Thank you, Chief. The reason I ask this is because when I'm looking at page 34 for October of 2020.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, there's a TV going off in the room. Can I just have a 2-minute break just to have that fixed?
Sure. Sorry, we just have a bit of an issue here. Excuse me, Chief.
Okay.
Apologies for that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Board Secretary, Mr. Plott. So back to the question, Chief. So when I'm looking at page 34, October of 2021, Simcoe, foot patrols, hours, basically almost 200 hours of foot patrol. It's definitely nice to see. I'm a true believer in community policing, but when I look at the following month of November, we only have 5.25 hours. So I'm just wondering, Chief, if you could just kind of enlighten me in regards to those numbers, please.
Did you say November 5 hours in November, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, Chief, if I may, on page 34, it says here October of 2021, 196 quarter hours, and then it says November, 5.25 hours.
Yeah, as I indicated, Mr. Chair, it's due to the timing of the report. Those stats won't be accurate. I would anticipate it being very close to the same, especially with the panorama. It's just that when the meeting is prior to the 15th of a month, it's always better after the 15th of a month. The stats, like all the stats for November, are skewed, which would then impact how they compare to the previous month stats. So that's why they're off. Again, my apologies for that. It's just that it was the timing of the meeting. That's beyond our scope here.
Okay, Chief, thank you. And I just wanted to reiterate to your officers that do these foot patrols throughout Norfolk, the community is definitely very grateful. We, the board, the Police Services Board here in Norfolk, are also very grateful to the officers that do the foot patrols at all hours of the day. And again, if we can continue that throughout the months and days, I mean, community policing is where it's at. So thank you, Chief. And with that, do we have any other questions of our Chief of Police in regards to stats? Seeing none, I'll put the motion to our board secretary, Aaron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The motion for that will be that the Ontario Provincial Police, Norfolk County Detachment, operational statistics and highlights October 2021 be received as information. We'll need a mover for that motion. I believe that's, thank you, Member Van Houten. Can we have a seconder for that motion? Thank you, Councillor Huffman. We can ask for the vote.
Seeing that, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. We'll move on to the point number 8, reports deferred from the previous meeting. Are there any reports that were deferred from the previous meeting? Seeing none, we can move on to point number 9, items for consideration. Member Willie Van Houten, update from the Labor Conference of November the 18th of 2021, page 38. So, Member Van Houten, if you may, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be very, very brief. You'll see how bad I am at making notes. I got all the notes here in here. The conference was held, like you said, on the 18th. It opened up with just a quick demonstration of some courses and some e-learning the e-learning portal that they have for different courses, like as an example, responsibility for board members. And they now have it that they kind of walked us through it a little bit, but it is very, very user-friendly, and you have certificates and tests, a tests first, and then certificates that come with it become, I think, more prevalent as time comes on with the responsibility of members to keep up their learning as well. There was a panel discussion. Overall, it was excellent. They had four panelists, and it was in regards to inclusion and diversity. And so I'll leave you with that. There's the notes below it. We also had a presentation from Peel Regional Police, who coupled together with the Ontario Human Rights Commission. They signed a memorandum of understanding, and they went through some of the challenges that they had as they were moving forward. So the minister, the Solicitor General, also brought greetings from the government and just gave a brief, quite brief overview of some of the policing grants and funding that was coming forward for help. The remaining of the meeting was to do with WSIB and some legal considerations, and maybe I'll just keep it that short if there's any questions from the members. I know they have had a chance to read it all. It's an excellent, it was my first time going to the conference, Mr. Chair. It was an excellent, very well done. It'd be nicer if it was in person rather than virtually, but it was nicely done.
Thank you, Member Van Houten. Are any questions on Member Huffman, any questions? Well, Member Van Houten, thank you very much for representing the Norfolk Police Services Board on November the 18th and for your detailed notes that are well documented on page 38, 39. Seeing that we have no questions, I will leave the motion up to our board secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The motion is that the update provided by Member Willie Van Houten regarding Labor Conference November 18th, 2021 be received as information. We'll need a mover for that motion. I see Member Van Houten. Can we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Huffman, and we can call the vote.
All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the agenda, 9.2. Giving an update myself on Zone 4 meeting planning committee. Just so that everyone is aware, the subcommittee met on 2 occasions on November the 9th and December the 6th. So basically, as it stands at this point in time, everything is going to be on hold due to the fact that we have a new variant, and I believe that the association is not too keen on having any indoor or any type of venture with regards to Zone 4. So that might be delayed possibly to May, if not October of 2022. So with that, I will say that sometime in February or March, we will meet again. Other than that, we have a location spoken of. I have contacted other members of our area, which, just so that everybody is aware, we spoke of this last, but our area is Zone 4, so it's Norfolk, Haldeman, Tillsonburg, Woodstock, Brant County, Brantford, Six Nations, Halton, Hamilton, and Niagara Police Services. So I've been in contact via the information that was given by our Chief Scott with the OPP with Tillsonburg and Woodstock. So I'm just waiting for callbacks to kind of have a clear indication of what is requested and required of us to hold this. So once that's available, we'll call a meeting in the new year. So with that, if there's no questions, I'll move this to a motion to our board secretary, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That motion is that the update provided by Acting Chair George Santos regarding Zone 4 meeting planning committee be received as information. We'll need a mover for that. Councillor Huffman. And seconded by Member Van Houten. We can call the vote, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you, board secretary. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next on the agenda, we have Mr. Ron Leclerc from the Solicitor General's office, update with regards to the complaint process for the Police Services Board. So, Mr. Leclerc, sorry for the long wait. It's 10:26. So if you want, we'll get you started. Thank you very much and welcome.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you. So I did meet with Aaron, Mr. Plant, and I provided him with a very high level, actually a very detailed presentation on the complaints process and the responsibilities of members of boards that are in Section 10. I offered to provide that to this board in the new year, if you'd like that. It's about an hour, depending on how many questions we get, but hour and a half maybe. And it's ideal if we just carve out a time that's specific for that. But while I'm here on the call, I will talk to you about the different levels of complaints that are different organizations that are involved in the complaint process, from the very simplest complaint to the most complex. So starting from what I would suggest is the bottom of that hierarchy, is internal complaints that the OPP would handle themselves about their officers' conduct. I'm sure your chief's been involved in some of those internal discipline issues, and I'm sure that they have a very robust professional standards branch that does internal investigations, chief's complaints, or commissioner's complaints in this case. And I don't even know if they call it professional standards, but that's what it was called from my policing background. But that's the internal complaints. From there, the next step up is what's called the OIPRD. That's the Office of the Independent Police Review Directorate. That is also a complaint based organization, and what they do is they review complaints about officers' conduct, but it could also be complaints about that turn out to be about policy that are in existence. So a lot of those complaints, when they come in, are farmed back to the home organization. So in your case, the OPP, but sometimes the OIPRD takes the lead with those. The OIPRD also has the ability to order a hearing under the Police Services Act against an officer. And then the next level up from that is the SIU. And SIU does serious investigations. So if the officers are involved in an investigation that results in serious harm to somebody, there's a specific definition of what meets that criteria. But when we do this training, I'll go specifically through all that with the definitions and what the test is before you call SIU. And I'm sure that Chief Scott has had incidences through his career where maybe not him, but other officers were involved in SIU investigations. It's not uncommon. At one point, SIU was investigating issues where officers were providing life-saving CPR attempts on somebody, and because the person passed away, that was meeting their mandate. They've since moved away from that because clearly that is not something where an officer's been engaged in misconduct. Moving up from there is the OCPC, the Ontario Civilian Police Commission, and that really looks at boards and also chiefs of police and their behavior. So my home base is my previous career was in Windsor Police. Windsor Police was subjected to a OCPC complaint just prior to me leaving the service. The report was sent in and reviewed, and there was a whole number of points. A lot of it was related to policy issues. And so there's a significant number of points that the chief and the board then look at and see how they can meet those needs or those deficiencies, I would say. So that's really the structure that's in place in Ontario. There will be some changes moving forward when the new legislation comes into play, but for the time being, we're really focused on the Police Services Act because we're still several months away from the CSP, the Community Safety Policing Act coming into effect. I will comment on what the mayor had said earlier, if that's okay, Mr. Chair.
By all means, no problem. Go ahead.
So just from a chronological perspective, the mayor was quite accurate in her comments today. After this incident came to light, myself and Chair Santos have had several conversations, and it did prompt me to call OCPC just to confirm what was transpiring as the advisor. And without getting into details and getting in the weeds, because we're in a public session, I can say that what the mayor provided you today is accurate in terms of the chronological order, and that the board hadn't been notified yet because they were in their very first steps of the complaint. And if they had proceeded with a complaint, meaning so the complaint had been lodged and they were in their first steps of their investigation, starting to contact some of the witnesses, and if there would have been a decision to move forward with a full investigation, at that point, the board would have been notified. But what transpired was, as you know, the chair resigned, and that effectively ended the process. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you for the clarification, Mr. Leclerc. I see Mr. Van Houten, the provincial appointee, has a question. Willie?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you as well, Mr. Leclerc, for the clarification there. I guess I have a question of, I was a little bit surprised when, as a board member, we didn't know right quickly. If you have any comments about that. And secondly, when these things should be in camera. From my previous experiences, this would have moved into in camera because it becomes personnel. There's a name attached. So I guess those are the two questions. Maybe I have it wrong from how it was in the past, from my experience.
Okay, so I'll address your second question first.
Okay.
With respect to in camera, my opinion is that it probably would have been better to do it in camera, because I think you could have fleshed out more details. Because you're right. So, I mean, there was no harm in, I mean, what was discussed here today is public information that was in the newspaper for the most part. The mayor provided some information from her letter, which clearly stated, she could share some of that information. I think she's very prudent in not disclosing specific details that might have been in that letter. But obviously, you're right. If you're going to get into a deep dive in terms of personnel, I think it's always prudent to be in camera. To go back to your first question, yeah, I mean, obviously, from my perspective, I think it'd be ideal if the board members had been notified by OCPC. I guess maybe in an awkward sense of the way, they notified the chair, who then resigned, and then Mr. Santos was left with a real gap in information. And obviously, from your perspective, a lack of information is troubling. So ideally, I think, and this is my opinion, ideally I think it would have been better if those steps had been shared directly from the OCPC. I did take the time to call OCPC and then to walk Mr. Santos through this verbally over the phone. But again, it's third-hand information that I'm providing, right? When I provide it to the chair. So yeah, I agree with you, Mr. Van Houten, that in an ideal world that would have happened. But in retrospect, it probably would have been better. But I don't know how the OCPC would. I don't know how the OCPC functions in terms of its notifications to boards. But I do agree with you that it would have been ideal. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you so much for all that. And I'm just trying to learn for myself to make sure that it always gets done right. You never know what happens up the road. What responsibility does, in your view, one member have to the others? And there's no chance that if I wouldn't have had any type of information come to me personally, even, but it had to do with the institution, that I wouldn't have went to all the members. At least immediately to the chair before anybody else would have known and then hopefully, depending on the matter, but also with the chief of police and all that, I wouldn't want to be holding anything like this. It's improper, and that there might be a chance that people couldn't do their due diligence because they just don't have the knowledge in front of them.
So in this particular case, we heard from the mayor, and so she's wearing a couple different hats. So she's wearing a hat as a member of this board, and she's also the mayor of the municipality. In this particular instance, the complaint was related to her being a witness to something that may have happened within a municipality and not necessarily in relation to the functioning of this police services board, other than it was the focus of the complaint was the chair. Again, I mean, I don't think the mayor as a witness was in any way bound to provide information to you. But again, in an ideal world, it might have been prudent to do so. So, you know, I think what she did today was very forthright in terms of the information that she provided in the chronological order. It might have been prudent for her to reach out to the soon-to-be chair, Mr. Santos, but I don't know all the dynamics as to how she interpreted her responsibilities as a witness. That was about as clear as mud. I realize that, but
Oh, I think you did an excellent job of answering the questions. I
Okay.
much.
Mr. Leclerc, I think that was excellent. The frustration that we had, Mr. Leclerc, both Councillor Huffman and Member Van Houten and myself, is there was no letter. So if you have no letter, basically we have no subject.
Right.
And what brought this to the attention of Member Van Houten and Councillor Huffman and I was basically the media. And one would think, Mr. Leclerc, that prior to the media knowing that we, the board, would have at least had some type of protocol with reference to, okay, if there's a complaint against the chair, then automatically it goes to the vice chair, we meet, and we take it from there until the issue is resolved. But that wasn't the case. But nevertheless, very good question, Mr. Van Houten. Councillor Huffman, any questions to Mr. Leclerc?
No questions per se. I guess just kind of in regards to the whole situation that we've been discussing today. Yeah, I agree with Willie, is that I am kind of second guessing why we weren't in camera. And I guess the bottom line too goes that even though we were told that there wasn't, I don't know, that it was a matter of council or whatever, if the media was made aware, I think it would have been due diligence that the police services board could have been made aware, and that just would have been a nice chain of command, and it would have relieved, I think, a lot of discomfort and a lot of miscommunication.
Yeah, I certainly don't disagree with you. I will say that when I spoke directly to the OCPC to try to get what information I could without violating the confidentiality of the investigation, and it isn't what the information I have is was in line with what the mayor said today. So yes, I certainly know that so I only know that 2 letters went out, and I only know 2 letters went out because one was to the chair, the former chair. He would have been notified by letter that he was under investigation. I know in the articles in the paper he kind of indicated that he wasn't aware of that investigation, but he did receive a letter, and the second letter went to the mayor. And I only know that because she's disclosed that, right? Other than that, I don't have a whole lot more. Certainly, you might consider, and I could explore this more with Mr. Plant as your administrator, with respect to responsibilities for disclosure. It might be something that you can put in your bylaw, conduct requirements of a board member. I don't know if you have a internal policy related to that, but it's certainly something that we can discuss, and we can also discuss a little bit more further, go deeper when I do a full presentation.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Leclerc. And I think it's important that we understand that these good questions that have come from this resolution, and the answers are important because ultimately it's the integrity of the Police Services Board and our role as a team. We work together as a team and we communicate as a team. So I'm glad that our mayor, who's a board member, has spoken on this and has basically given us a clear indication of where she stood and stands. So with that, if we have any other questions, oh, I see provincial appointee Van Houten. Go ahead.
Just maybe a comment on one of the last comments that Mr. Leclerc made, reviewing the bylaws, or if you have the proper bylaws and the proper procedures in place in the first place, you prevent any other problems from coming up. I'm guessing that is to your point. And I guess our objective is to have everything go as smooth as possible so that you can work effectively with one another and that the trust factor and everything is there. So that's my reasoning for the questioning and the reasoning for some of the conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, 100%. Governance is important. That's really part of why I'm an advisor, and I come to different meetings to assist. Everybody has bumps in the road along the way. Some are bigger than others, right? But if you have effective governance, it helps lessen the impacts of those bumps along the way.
I agree 100%. So with that, do we have anything else to add? Councillor Huffman, provincial appointee Van Houten, to Mr. Leclerc? No? Seeing none, Mr. Leclerc, do you have anything else to add?
Look forward to providing you with a full educational piece.
Okay. So we'll leave that to our board secretary. We'll book something in either January or February, depending on our schedules, and hopefully we can be enlightened with the rules and practices, and we can go from there. Thank you for attending. We want to wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and we look forward to seeing you next year.
Thank you
very much, Mr. Leclerc.
Happy holidays.
Thank you. Likewise. So with this, I will pass it on for a motion. I don't think we need a motion, do we?
We can receive and follow that, Mr. Chair.
Okay, it's fine.
So the recommended motion is that the update by Ron Leclerc, Solicitor General's Office, regarding complaint process for Police Services Board be received as information. Can we please have a mover for that motion? Councillor Huffman. Can we have a seconder? I see Member Van Houten. We can call for the vote, Mr. Chair.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, that seems to be carried. We will move on. Okay, so we're at 9.4 on the agenda, information memo, Community Policing Committee update on page 40. I will ask our board secretary, Mr. Plott, to enlighten us on this, because I understand you were the secretary for this, so if you could, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Through you to the board, the information memo is before you in your agenda package. And really just to provide an update regarding some of the strengths, some of the weaknesses, some of the challenges the committee's facing as we sort of resume meetings. The committee's had some struggles being able to meet quorum, and like I said in the memo, staff will continue to engage the committee and will continue to work towards that. If there continues to be concerns regarding meeting quorum, staff will bring up some sort of report or memo forward to discuss with the board how to move forward with that concern. I really don't have much more to add to that, but I'm happy to answer any questions there might be from the board members.
I see Member Van Houten has a question.
Maybe just a comment, Mr. Chairman, if I could. And I know it's much more difficult, and it must be so much more difficult for the Community Policing Committee as well. Things have to happen virtually, and so I think up the road we'll probably have better attendance, and hope we can make it a little more fun to be part of it or whatever. I know it's so difficult in these times getting members together because the enthusiasm isn't there when you can't do it the way we're accustomed to a lot of times. So hopefully up the road we can get better participation and such. Just a thought.
Thank you. If I can just add to that, I think it's vital that we keep the community policing groups in Norfolk County going, and we support them in all ways that we can. And I know that Norfolk Council has in the past and will continue, but I just want them to know, as a Norfolk Police Services Board, that they've got 100% of our support to move on. And unfortunately, this seems to be happening with a number of groups, and tack on the pandemic, unfortunately, it doesn't help. But as long as we can keep our lines of communication open, I think it's important from the Police Services Board perspective with the community policing. Now, Chief Scott, do you have any questions or any comments in this regard? Because I know 2 of your officers attended.
No, I don't have any comments. I know Norfolk County Police has always been a supporter of the Community Policing Committee. Perhaps Staff Fashing has some comments as well, but.
Yeah, I think what's happened is the Community Policing Committee took on a new form where we've got a group collective from throughout Norfolk County, and what happened is at the onset of the formation of that group, along came COVID. So it's been very difficult in that time to establish those relationships and for the committee to really gain traction. As Member Van Houten alluded to earlier, hopefully down the road when we get back to live sessions and live interaction, the group will gain some strength again.
Okay, Chief, to Staff Sergeant Fashing, thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, I'll pass this on for a motion to our Board Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The recommended motion is that the information memo regarding the Community Policing Committee update be received as information. We'll need a mover for that motion. Councillor Huffman, seconded by Member Van Houten. We can call for the vote, Mr. Chair.
All in favor? Carried. Okay, we'll move on. 9.5, information memo in reference to speed reduction signs. We did hear earlier from our Chief of Police, and I believe Staff Sergeant Fashing in this regard, that the signs will be going up in January. So to our Chief of Police, Chief Scott, if we could just have Staff Sergeant Fashing just kind of enlighten us once again in that regard, please, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just an update for the board. The Norfolk County Traffic Safety Committee met on the 18th of November. During this meeting, we finalized locations for the incoming signs for this year's round of incoming signs. And again, we're hoping for deployment in January. As it stands now, we're going to have these safety signs in Renton. We'll have them on Highway 24 North and Highway 24 South in Simcoe, on Highway 59 in Andy's Corners, on County Road 21 in Lyndoch. As you know, we already have signs in place on Highway 6 in Port Dover. We already have signs in place in Villanova. We'll also be erecting signs in Delhi on Church Street. And that's our progress so far.
Any questions from the board members? I just have one quick question through our Chief of Police to the Staff Sergeant Fashing. When you reference Highway 24 North, are we referencing Norfolk Street North and Highway 24 South?
Mr. Chair, yes. That's Norfolk Street North and Norfolk Street South.
Okay, thank you, because I know there's been numerous complaints in that section of highway, which is 4 lanes, referring to Norfolk Street North. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I'll pass this for a motion to our Board Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The motion is that the information memo regarding speed reduction signs be received as information. Can we have a mover? Member Van Houten. Can we have a seconder? Councillor Huffman. Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Chair, we can call the vote.
Great, thank you. All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. So we'll move on quickly. 9.6 has already been looked after, so we're going to go to 10.10, correspondence arising from the previous business. So we have here 10.1, information memo, letter about marijuana to the new Minister of Health, which I believe is Mr. Jane Duclos. And so my question here to the board secretary, Mr. Plott, have we received a response from the new Minister of Health?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the board, we have not received a response from anyone from the Ministry of Health.
Okay, now board members, since we haven't received a letter from our Minister of Health, my understanding is someone is turning a blind eye on this issue, and I mean this issue is a very important issue in Norfolk County. If I remember correctly, our late Winston Churchill once said, I never worry about action, but only about inaction. So the concern that I have here is we as the Norfolk Police Services Board are requesting information that we're not getting to. So I would ask our board members, Councillor Huffman and provincial appointee Van Houten, what would be our next step? Any comments? Councillor Huffman, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I would suggest that we resend this letter, and hopefully we can get a response. I know that we did send it at a very, I guess we were looking at, there were changes in portfolios and things like that, but I would expect that we should have received something by now. So I certainly recommend that we resend this letter and stress the urgency that we're requiring some answers, and we need that to move forward. Cannabis continues to be an issue here in Norfolk County, and we need to have all of our resources lined up.
Thank you, Councillor Huffman. I agree totally. And just so that everyone is aware, this is an urban problem. This is a rural problem. Norfolk has been inundated with these major loopholes. When we think of urban, Winnipeg, the province, has been dealing with major issues on this, and Vancouver also the same. So definitely, I'm thinking here, if I can just mention to Councillor Huffman, maybe I get a hold of our local member of parliament to see if it's possible that this could be hand-delivered to the Minister of Health in person, representing Haldeman Norfolk. I think our member of parliament might be able to do that if that's the wish of the board. What's the thoughts? Councillor, or sorry, Mr. Van Houten, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I totally agree with what was stated to reinitiate contact, and I also believe in the comment that you're making, which is always prudent to do, is to take it to your local member and to have it initiated from there as well, so that everyone's aware of what's needed to be done. So I think both those two steps will need to happen. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Member Van Houten. Councillor Huffman, are you in agreement with that?
Yes, I am in agreement.
Okay, being that we have support of that, I would ask the board secretary, Mr. Plott, to follow our wishes, please. So with that, if we can have a motion, please.
If I may, Mr. Chair, through you to the board, staff are looking for just a little bit more direction. The letter has been sent to ministers twice now, as well as members of parliament. Is there anybody in addition for the third time we should include in the circulation?
Any comments, members? Sorry, Councillor Huffman?
Okay, it's been sent twice. What are,
That's
Aaron,
correct.
what are the dates that it's been sent?
My understanding
got
from
that.
what I looked on the file, Councillor Huffman, one was the first letter sent by our previous chair was August the 8th,
Okay,
and the second was an email that was sent by our board secretary after, I believe, our last meeting, which was October the 20th. So I believe that was done a week after the fact. But correct me if I'm wrong, Board Secretary Plott, is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
okay. Well, then it seems like this would be definitely a reason to reach out to our local representation. And that's what we have an MP for. So I certainly recommend that we go that route.
Thank you, Councillor Huffman. Member Van Houten, comment?
Yes, I would agree with that exactly, but I wouldn't hesitate for me, there's very little cost on it, to send it a third time with a notification that this is a third request.
Okay, excellent. I think that's important. Again, you know, the comment that I put forth prior about the late Winston Churchill is important. You know, you never worry about action, but you only worry about inaction. And someone up in Ottawa, a bureaucrat or the minister, has to look at this very seriously, and it's a federal issue. And this needs to be addressed. So I appreciate Councillor Huffman and Provincial Appointee Van Houten's comments. And so to the board, Secretary, Mr. Plott, if you could please, action.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Staff will action that after the meeting. If there's no further discussion, we can have a motion to receive and file this information memo and for staff to proceed as directed. Can we please have a mover? Member Van Houten, and seconded by Councillor Huffman. Can we have a vote?
Okay. All in favor? Okay, it's carried. Okay, we'll move on then to next meeting. If I could just, before we move on to next meeting, I just wanted to comment. I didn't put here any questions to our media. Now, to our board secretary, I don't think the media is with us, so there are no questions. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And is there any other business before we go on to the next meeting? What I'd like to do is, board members, is I would like to just quickly mention something that has been concerning to me, and that is since November the 3rd, and as everyone is aware of, an incident that took place in Port Dover, Ontario. We as a board cannot comment because the Special Investigations Unit is looking into this matter. So the Special Investigations Unit, the SIU, which is an arm's length agency of the Ontario Ministry of Attorney General, we can't really get involved or comment. But one thing I want to make clear to the board and the board members is this. I've replied to about 136 phone calls since this issue on November the 3rd of 2021. And my response to these individuals in every walk of life in Norfolk County and outside of Norfolk is basically that we as the Police Services Board cannot comment because of its ongoing investigation. And the Special Investigations Unit has a mandate, and their mandate is fairly clear. And I think that has been put out to all the members of the public through our local media. So I'm content in that regard. So I just want to make something very clear to the board members that because it's, again, with the SIU, that we just have to be very patient and wait to see what the outcome is. I understand it's up to 3 months, but it could be longer than that. So from a Norfolk County perspective and from the Police Services Board, I wanted to just give my condolences to Mrs. Katanko from the Police Services Board in regards to this. I know in the past, no one has really stepped up to give condolences with the fear of the Special Investigations Unit, but I think it's proper that the Norfolk Police Services Board gives condolences, and we just ask our citizens of Norfolk and our public to be very patient and have faith in our system. I truly have faith in the Special Investigations Unit, and I will leave it at that. If Councillor Huffman, you want to comment, or provincial appointee Mr. Van Houten, you wish to comment, you can, but again, just a clear understanding that it is with the Special Investigations Unit. And to the general public, that we are well aware of what's happening, and these calls that have come in are concerned citizens that have to clearly understand that we cannot comment because we cannot jeopardize this investigation. Thank you. Councillor Huffman, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair Santos. You explained that extremely well, and it is such a difficult balance because it is currently under investigation, and we do have that fine line to walk. And thank you for expressing your condolences on behalf of our Police Services Board to Mrs. Katenko, and I'd like to extend in terms of the entire Katenko family. So yes, we will follow the process that's been in place, and hopefully for all of the residents and especially the family, there are some resolutions that come forward very soon. So thank you very much for addressing that.
Thank you, Councillor. Member Van Houten, comment?
Just that it was very well put, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, members. I also want to add that Mr. Nagy unfortunately wasn't able to be here today to represent and ask questions in regards to the protocol concerning external police forces. So we're going to leave it at that, but he would like to have an in-person meeting, hopefully in January. So with that, board members, we're looking at possibly January the 19th at 9 a.m. of 2022. So taking that into account, and also to our police chief, it's over the mid-mark, which is the 15th, so hopefully we could have some stats that bring us up to date for 2021. So is January the 19th, 2022 at 9 a.m. okay?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that should be fine.
Thank you, Chief. Councillor Huffman, Member Van Houten, is that date?
Yeah, that should be fine.
I'm fine. Yeah. We'll have a new member then too, I guess.
Yeah, and just so that everyone is aware, I believe, and I'll leave this to Councillor Huffman to kind of give us a clear indication from a Norfolk County perspective of our new member that will be sworn in, I believe, in the next week. So if you can, Councillor Huffman, just give us a clear understanding, please.
Okay, could you repeat that? What do you want? And all of a sudden it jogged my memory that we didn't discuss that. So what would you like a clear understanding on? Sorry.
Yeah, that Norfolk County Council has picked an individual to represent Norfolk County around this table on the Norfolk Police Services Board. And that the swearing in, I believe, is next week, but can you enlighten us, please?
Okay, I don't have too many more details, just that it was at the end of our meeting last night in closed session, obviously, because there was an identifiable individual. And I apologize, I believe Mr. Case is his name. Aaron, could you confirm that?
Just 1 second.
Okay.
Counselor? Mr. Chair, I was not at the meeting yesterday, so I just want to confirm what was come out of closed session, but I can definitely circulate the name if it's out of closed session. But everyone, the minutes of the Counseling Committee meeting yesterday will be ratified next week at the council meeting, so then it'll all sort of be ratified at that point. So if I could just perhaps have just a moment to email the committee at a future date with the actual official name once the person's been ratified.
Councillor Huffman, I don't have a problem with that. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. It was announced in open session, the individual's name.
Oh.
It was all made public last night. So I'm sure our powers that be will be in touch with the individual, and we look forward to him joining the Police Services Board. I'm quite excited to have him on board.
Thank you, Councillor. Member Van Houten, looked like you had a question there.
Oh, okay. No, no, I'm good. Thank you. It was done in open session. I didn't know if it won't be official though is it till a council meeting?
Till council next week on the 21st. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought we wouldn't find out till after the 21st, but I didn't know how the process worked there for that.
Yeah, I don't know if I let the cat out of the bag or whatever,
Yeah.
but it was on camera last night. So anyone watching the meeting last night knows
Oh.
the individual's name.
Okay.
So we're all
Okay.
good.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Huffman. With that, before we close, I just wanted to say to our Police Services Board, I want to wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year from the Chair. To our Ontario Provincial Police, that Chief, to your staff, a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and to all officers that keep us safe throughout all hours of the day, thank you. From the bottom of our hearts to yours, and may I just ask, Chief, that you send that to all your officers out there, and to the officers that are working on the RIDE program to keep us safe, and at the same time for all officers in Norfolk County and surrounding area that continue to do an excellent job of keeping us safe and sound. For this we thank. All right, and with that, I will ask a motion for adjournment. So, Board Secretary?
The motion is that the meeting be adjourned at 11:10 a.m. Can we please have a mover? Councillor Hoffman, seconded by Member Van Houten. We can have a vote.
All in favor? It's carried. And Happy New Year to all. Thank you.
Merry Christmas, everyone, and
Merry
Happy
Christmas.
New Year.
Thank you.
You too. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Happy holidays to everyone. Have a great time with your families.
Thank you very much.